aircraft traffic over Orlando is not that unusual. There are tourists coming in every day, 49 million of them last year, but that's still 9 miles away. Today, we're at the Orlando Veterans Park, and we're here to check out this nondescript monument with 7 names on it. And these 7 men gave their lives in service to their country on March 31st, 1972. The monument itself is just a short distance away from the VA Medical Clinic. Also located in the park is the Vietnam Veterans Memorial. 2 of the flight crew members had already seen service in Vietnam. But our story takes place not quite 9 miles south of here, right near McCoy Air Force Base. McCoy, now known as Orlando International Airport, was a SAC base for the Strategic Air Command, so it was not unusual to see tankers laden with fuel or even nuclear-capable B-57 bombers just flying around the neighborhood. As part of America's nuclear deterrent, they would have been heavily armed, and you can still see the ammo bunkers along Tradeport Drive on the airport property. In 1961, the B-47s were replaced with the 4047th Strategic Wing Heavy flying B-52s. March 31st, 1972 was pretty much the same as any other day at McCoy. From 1971 to 1972, I was assigned to McCoy Air Force Base, located in the beautiful city of Orlando, Florida. McCoy was a SAC base with B-52 bombers and KC-135 tankers. At the time of my stay, most of the B-52s and personnel were TDY to Guam for bombing missions over North Vietnam. It was getting close to lunchtime and everybody started milling around the fire station chow hall. I had KP that meal and was setting the tables for the cook. The klaxon horn went off indicating there was an in-flight emergency. The dispatcher's voice came over as a speaker informing us we had a B-52 Heavy with an indicator light showing fire on the engine and that there were 7 souls on board. The dispatcher went on to say that it had just taken off minutes before, fully fueled with 44,000 gallons of JP4. I was fairly new and not long out of firefighting tech school, but had been around long enough to know that those indicator lights were quite common and seldom meant that there was an actual problem other than the indicator light. The routine was we go out to our assigned rigs, everybody jumps into their bunker pants and puts on the silver turnout jackets. The hand linemen finish up with their Scott Air packs and hoods and gloves. All the rigs responded out to their pre-assigned spots on the taxiways along the full length of the runway. Wait for the aircraft to land, and when it passes your location, you pull in behind and follow it down the runway. The pilot would give the thumbs up, the dispatcher would clear us, and we'd go back to finishing our meal, polishing the brass, or hiding away from the station captain's eyes. Day after day, as easy as that. But not today. The McCoy Air Force Base Fire Department consisted of 5 first-line manned crash rigs, an O-11A, an O-11B, and 2 comparatively newer P-2s, and an O-6, which was basically a huge carbon dioxide extinguisher with a long boom applicator, and a tractor-trailer runway foamer. The crossband structural equipment was a new P-8 and older 750 GPM pumper. Today I drew the short straw, and my assignment was driver of the O-11A crash rig. The O-11A was the oldest crash rig we had and was actually a reserve unit being used by the newer O-11B was receiving maintenance. We took up our position mid-runway. I can remember arriving and starting up the pump engine to make sure it was warm and ready. I took a look up and down the runways, noting that most everybody was in position. We could see it now, it was just short of the runway on approach, and our crew chief commented that it didn't look lined up right. It was close now, right over the housing area across the road next to the end of the runway. It was close up. It seemed close enough to touch. It was just hovered there for a second, and then it rolled, pointing one of its enormous wings directly at the ground, then went right into the housing area.
The B-52 was one of the world's biggest airplanes, a mainstay of our heavy bomber force in Southeast Asia. Today, one of those giant planes crashed into a residential area near Orlando, Florida, and blew up in flames. The result? All 7 crewmen killed, at least 8 civilians injured, 1 critically, and a number of houses badly damaged. Details from Jim Lewis of WFTV in Orlando.
The plane did not score a direct hit on the civilian homes in this area is perhaps luck, perhaps a tribute to skillful flying on the part of a pilot.
Seconds after the pilot reported his onboard emergency, witnesses saw the mammoth bomber, its engine in flames, fly in low out of a bank of clouds. Suddenly, it seemed to them, the plane nosedived to Earth. The crash spread wreckage, flaming debris, and burning jet fuel over a wide area. More than half a dozen homes were set afire. 4 were gutted. But despite the injuries to 8 residents, there were miraculously no civilian deaths. Donald Spar was sitting in his living room when he heard the engines of the B-52 a bit louder than usual. He remembers thinking, they're really coming in low this time. Then heard the crash and saw a sheet of flames envelop the front of his home.
I immediately moved out of the sliding doors at the rear of my house and went to the rear of my property. When I was there, the people next door, a mother, 2 girls, and a boy were trapped in the back of their yard. A neighbor jumped the fence, and the 2 of us broke down the back of the fence in order to get them out. The little girl was hurt. I think she was burned, and they were taken to the hospital.
According to the Air Force, there were no nuclear weapons aboard the B-52. Of the injured civilians, most were children. One, 10-year-old Anthony Ellington, was rushed by the Air Force to the Brooke Hospital Burn Center in San Antonio. Jim Lewis, WFTV News, Orlando, Florida.
From that day forward, Silver Beach would never be the same. Wes Stoops, a 16-year-old from Oak Ridge High School, was at home that day because of the Easter break. He and his friends were going to play football in that vacant field, but it had rained earlier. Front page of the Orlando Sentinel the next day showed the firefighters putting out the flames in that field where they would have been playing. Even though it was a military plane that crashed, Chief Olin Strickland quickly called for mutual aid from Orlando Fire Department, who shared the runways. OFD quickly sent the McCoy Jetport Ward LaFrance Statesman along with several other pieces of apparatus. Tom Smith was sailing outside of his house on Meriwether Drive about 2 blocks away when he saw the plane crash. He was only 3 years back from Vietnam, where he spent a 13-month stint. He said it was just a massive explosion. It shook everybody around. It reminded him of napalm. I spent 8 years as a U.S. Air Force firefighter, and even I can't imagine what it would be like to see 40,000 gallons of jet fuel go up at one time. I mean, luckily there were no munitions on board, but what you're watching here is a pit fire at Chanute Air Force Base, where, at most, we used 1,000-gallon burns. I can't even imagine what it would be like to see 40,000 gallons go at one time. And remember, this is a controlled burn with an intact frame of an aircraft, not with parts spread out over a 2-block area. It was anything but controlled for Nancy Robertson and her 3 kids, Robin, Danny, and Laura. The aircraft had landed virtually on their front lawn, and now they were in the pool behind the house, trying to stay away from the fire. Tom Smith, along with another resident, Don Spar, were able to knock a section of the fence down and get the Robertsons to safety. And even though the aircraft crashed on civilian property, the security police rushed in quickly to secure the crash site itself. Also on hand were members of the Orange County Sheriff's Department, along with the Orlando Police Department, and it was all hands on deck, with FHP even being on scene. Longtime Mayor Carl Langford was there, along with the Deputy Mayor and the City Attorney. The commander of the 2nd Air Force, Russell Doherty, flew in from Georgia, where he'd been inspecting the base there. As Tom Smith moved towards Conway Road, he saw a boy running towards him. 10-year-old Anthony Ellington had all his clothes burned off. They tried to get him calmed down and lay him down. Ellington was severely burned, and the Air Force was able to air evac him to their burn center at Brooks Air Force Base in San Antonio, Texas, although he died there 3 days later of a fever. Ellington was the only civilian to die as a result of the crash. Crash site at Silver Beach is just a retention pond with a chain link fence now. There's no other evidence that there was a plane crash here. Robertson's house and 4 others were rebuilt. In March of 2014, on the 40th anniversary of the crash, the county placed a historical marker along Conway Road. The monument inside the Veterans Park is the only other reminder of the crash, even though only the names are listed on the monument. The Air Force began an investigation right away, focusing in on mechanical problems. It appeared that call sign Sir 21, the B-52, had been traveling at about 4,000 feet when it reported to the tower that there was a fire on board. They advised that their number 7 engine was on fire and that the number 8 engine had stopped working. At this time, the pilots had their hands full, but they still had another 6 engines to run on. There's a lot of conjecture and speculation as to what happened to the B-52, and Till the Air Force actually releases a full report, we'll probably never know, but in Air Force parlance, SIR-21 did not complete its mission. 3 years after the crash in 1975, McCoy Air Force Base closed forever. This past weekend, we visited the B-52 Memorial Park, lovingly cared for by the Greater Orlando Aviation Authority's maintenance branch. This is one of the few places where you can view B-52 up close and personal. At one time, this B-52D, tail number 687, was actually assigned to the 306 Bomb Wing here at McCoy Air Force Base. But its current paint scheme shows it to be from the 7th Bomb Wing in Carswell Air Force Base in Texas, where in 1984, the plane made its last flight from Carswell to the Orlando International Airport, where it remains on display to this day. You can visit Orlando B-52 Memorial Park. It's located on Bear Road on the airport property. Just follow the signs. It's open from 7 a.m. to sunset on most days, and parking is free. There's no admission charge. I hope you enjoyed today's video and you might choose to subscribe to the channel. And remember, if you do subscribe, don't forget to click on that bell icon. That way you'll be notified the next time I upload a video. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.